Princess Zarathe stood at the tall window of her crystal tower. Her skin looked like clear glass with soft blue light flowing beneath it. Her people, the Veltari, all looked this way, beautiful and delicate like living gemstones. She watched the strange ship come down from the dark sky above their world. The ship was ugly compared to Veltari vessels. It looked heavy and strong like a weapon. Black metal covered its surface with scars from old battles. This was a human ship. The first humans to ever visit their peaceful world. Her father, Emperor Kethmoran, had made a deal with these humans. An alliance, he called it. The Veltari would share their crystal technology. The humans would protect them from the dangerous things that lived in the dark spaces between stars. Zarathe did not like this idea. She had heard stories about humans. They came from a world of endless war, a place where only the strong lived. They fought their own kind for thousands of years before they reached the stars. Now they moved through space like hunters looking for prey. The ship landed with a loud noise that made her crystal skin ring like a bell. Steam rose from the metal as it cooled. A door opened in the side. Figures walked out. The humans looked small and soft compared to the Veltari guards who waited for them. Their skin was not clear like crystal. It was dark and solid. They wore thick clothes that covered most of their bodies. But something about the way they moved made Zarathe feel cold inside. One human walked in front of the others. He was taller than the rest with broad shoulders. His face showed many small scars. His eyes moved back and forth, watching everything. Even from far away, Zarathe could feel something dangerous about him. Her father walked forward to meet the humans. The Veltari Emperor stood 9 feet tall. His crystal body caught the light of their 3 suns and threw rainbows across the landing platform. He should have looked powerful next to the small humans. Instead, he looked fragile. The scarred human stepped forward. He spoke in a deep voice that carried across the distance. Emperor Kethmoran, I am Captain Marcus Chun of the Terran Federation. We thank you for welcoming us to your world. As the captain spoke, his eyes moved across the crowds of Veltari people. They stopped when they found Zarathe in her tower window. For a moment that felt like forever, the human warrior stared directly at her. Zarathe felt her crystal heart beat faster. The captain's eyes were dark brown, almost black. They looked tired but alert, like an animal that never truly slept. When he looked at her, she felt like prey being studied by a predator. She stepped back from the window, her hands shaking. Her crystal skin grew darker as fear filled her. She had never felt anything like this before. The Veltari knew no violence. Their world was peaceful. Their people solved problems with music and art and careful thinking. But this human made her remember old fears buried deep in her mind. Fears from when her people were young and wild animals hunted them in dark caves. Fears that should have been forgotten long ago. The ceremony continued below. Her father showed the humans the sacred crystal gardens. The captain walked through the beautiful space with his fellow humans. Even from a distance, Zarathe could see how carefully he moved. His steps were quiet. His hands stayed close to his body, ready to reach for weapons that were not there. The other humans seemed more relaxed. They looked around at the singing crystals with wonder. They smiled and pointed at the floating lights that danced between the trees. But not Captain Chun. He watched the shadows. He checked the high places where threats might hide. He acted like danger could come from anywhere at any moment. That evening, the humans were given rooms in the Crystal Palace. Zarathe tried to eat dinner with her father, but food tasted like ash in her mouth. She could not stop thinking about the captain's eyes. Father, she said quietly, why did you choose to ally with them? They are so different from us. Emperor Kethmoran set down his crystal cup. The liquid inside glowed with soft light. Because my daughter The universe is not as peaceful as our world. There are things in the dark that would destroy everything we have built. Our beauty, our art, our very lives. The humans know how to fight these things. But they frighten me, Zarathe admitted. Her crystal skin flickered with nervous energy. Especially their leader. When he looked at me, I felt something I have never felt before. Something terrible. Her father reached across the table and touched her hand. His skin was warm like sunlight through crystal. Fear is not always wrong, child. Sometimes it warns us of real danger. But sometimes it teaches us about ourselves. What do you mean? The humans carry something we have forgotten. They remember what it means to fight for survival. To protect those who cannot protect themselves. Yes, they are dangerous. But they choose to use that danger to guard others instead of harm them. Zarathe pulled her hand away. But father, he scares me. Really scares me. Not like being afraid of falling or getting hurt. This is different. When I saw him, every part of my body told me to run and hide. Emperor Kethmoran nodded slowly. I know, daughter. I felt it too. But we must remember why they came here. Not to hurt us, but to help us. The captain you fear so much has spent his whole life fighting monsters so people like us can sleep safely. How can you be sure? Because if he wanted to hurt us, we would already be dead. The simple truth of those words made Zarathe's crystal skin grow cold. Her father was right. The humans could have taken their world easily. Instead, they offered friendship. But knowing this did not make her fear go away. As she went to her chamber that night, she could not shake the feeling that Captain Marcus Chun was something beyond her understanding. Something beautiful and terrible at the same time. She lay on her crystal bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she would have to meet the humans face to face. She would have to stand near the captain and try not to let her fear show. But deep inside, she wondered if some fears were too strong to overcome. The next morning brought the start of the diplomatic summit. Representatives from 12 different species came to the Veltari homeworld. They filled the great crystal hall with strange shapes and colors. Bird-like Cathane with bright feathers. Tall, thin Morden with too many arms. The round, floating Zephyr who spoke in musical tones. But among all these aliens, the humans stood out. Not because they looked strange, but because they looked so normal. Yet something about them made the other species keep their distance. Zarathe watched from the balcony above the main floor. She told herself she was there to observe the historic meeting. But really, she could not stop watching Captain Marcus Chun. The human captain sat at a small table with his team. He wore simple clothes, not the fancy robes of other diplomats. His face showed no emotion as he listened to long speeches about trade agreements and shared technology. But his eyes never stopped moving. During the first break, Zarathe decided to go down to the hall. She wanted to see the humans up close. As she walked past their table, she heard Captain Chun talking quietly to another human. The Cathani ambassador has a weapon hidden in his feathers, Chun said in a low voice. Small energy blade. The Morden delegate keeps checking the exits. And those Zephyr are not as peaceful as they pretend to be. The other human, a woman with short gray hair, nodded. Should we report this? No. Everyone here is armed except the Veltari. It's normal for first contact situations. But stay ready. Zarathe felt her crystal skin grow cold. She had not noticed any weapons. To her, all the aliens looked friendly and interested in peace. But Captain Chun saw threats everywhere as the day went on. She watched him more carefully. When servers brought food to the tables, Chun waited to see others eat first before touching anything. When delegates walked behind him, his shoulders tensed slightly. When new people entered the hall, his hand moved toward his belt where no weapon hung. But what frightened her most was how strong he was. During lunch, One of the heavy crystal art pieces began to fall from its floating platform. The anti-gravity field failed without warning. The sculpture weighed as much as 3 Veltari adults. If it hit the ground, it would shatter into deadly pieces. Several aliens jumped back in fear. The Veltari servants rushed to get the emergency lifters. But Captain Chen simply stepped forward and caught the falling crystal with his bare hands. The massive sculpture should have crushed him. Instead, he held it steady while the servants fixed the gravity field. His arms did not shake. His breathing did not change. He lifted the artwork back onto its platform like it weighed nothing. Zarathe stared in shock. The strongest Veltari warrior would need mechanical help to lift such weight. But this human did it as easily as picking up a flower. "Impressive," said a voice behind her. She turned to see Ambassador Valanesh, one of her father's advisors. His crystal skin flickered with worry. "The humans are much stronger than they appear." "How is that possible?" Zarathe asked. "They look so small and soft." "Their world made them that way," Valanesh explained. "High gravity, dangerous animals, constant war. Only the strongest survived to have children. After millions of years, they became something new, something built for survival." Zarathe watched Captain Chun return to his seat. None of the other humans seemed surprised by what he had done. To them, it was normal. "What else can they do?" she asked. Valanash's crystal skin grew darker. "I have read their military records." Captain Chun once fought in the void of space wearing only a combat suit. He boarded an enemy ship alone and defeated 40 trained soldiers. Another time, he held a choke point against 100 attackers for 6 hours until help arrived. That's impossible. For us, yes. For them, it is just Tuesday. The afternoon sessions continued peacefully. Various species talked about sharing knowledge and resources. Captain Chun mostly stayed quiet, but when he spoke, others listened. His voice carried authority that made even the larger aliens pay attention. As evening approached, Zarathe began to relax. Maybe her fears were foolish. Maybe the humans really did want peace. Maybe Captain Chun was just being careful, not dangerous. Then the attack came. It started with a strange sound. A low humming that made the crystal walls vibrate. Zarathe looked around in confusion. The other delegates seemed puzzled too. Only the humans reacted with alarm. "Everyone down," Captain Chun shouted as he stood up from his chair. The words were barely out of his mouth when the great windows exploded inward. Dark shapes flew through the broken crystal. Attackers in black armor with weapons that fired bright energy bolts. Chaos filled the hall. Aliens screamed and ran in panic. The Veltari guards, trained for ceremony not battle, stood frozen in shock. Energy bolts burned through the air, leaving smoking holes in the beautiful crystal walls. But Captain Chun moved like he had been expecting this moment his whole life. He grabbed the heavy crystal sculpture he had lifted earlier and threw it at the nearest attacker. The artwork hit the armored figure with crushing force, sending him flying across the room. Before the first attacker hit the wall, Chun was already moving toward the next one. Zarathe watched in horrified fascination as the human captain became something else. Something terrible and beautiful at the same time. He moved faster than her eyes could follow. His hands found weapons that the attackers dropped. In moments, he turned their own tools against them. One attacker aimed at fleeing civilians. Chun appeared beside him like a ghost and broke the warrior's arm with a single twist. Another tried to shoot at Zarathe on the balcony. Chun threw a crystal shard with perfect aim, hitting the weapon and making it explode in the attacker's hands. The battle lasted less than 2 minutes. When it ended, 6 attackers lay unconscious on the floor. Captain Chun stood among them, breathing heavily but not wounded. His clothes were torn and dirty, but his dark eyes were calm. The other humans moved efficiently to secure the prisoners and check for more threats. They worked like they had done this 1,000 times before. Zarathe realized she was shaking, not from fear of the attackers, but from seeing what Captain Chun truly was. She had watched him save everyone in the room, including herself. But the way he moved, the way he fought, the way he turned violence into an art form, it terrified her. Her father arrived with more guards. The prisoners were taken away. The wounded were helped. The hall slowly returned to normal. But Zarathe could not stop staring at Captain Chun. He was talking quietly with her father, explaining what had happened. His voice was calm and steady, like he was discussing the weather. This was what humans were. Not just strong or fast or smart. They were weapons that chose to protect instead of destroy. They were monsters that had learned to love, and that scared her more than any attacker ever could. As the evening ended, and the delegates returned to their rooms, Zarathe remained on the balcony. She watched Captain Chun walk across the broken crystal floor. His footsteps crunched on the shattered pieces of what had been beautiful art. Tomorrow, she would have to face him again. She would have to pretend she was not terrified of what she had seen. She would have to act like watching him fight had not changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. But she knew the truth now. Humans were not just allies or friends or protectors. They were necessary. 3 days after the attack, life in the Crystal Palace slowly returned to normal. The broken windows were replaced. New artwork was installed. The diplomatic talks continued as if nothing had happened. But Zarathe could not forget what she had seen. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Captain Chun moving through the attackers like death itself. The memory made her crystal skin grow cold and dark. Her father found her in her private garden that morning. She sat beside a small singing crystal that played soft melodies when the wind touched it. The sound usually calmed her, but today it felt hollow. "Daughter," Emperor Kethmorin said gently, "you have been avoiding the summit. The other delegates ask where you are." "I cannot face them," Zarathe admitted. "Especially not him." "Captain Chun?" She nodded, her crystal form flickering with nervous energy. "Father, I saw what he did, how he fought, how he moved. It was like watching a predator hunt. Beautiful and terrible and wrong all at the same time." Her father sat beside her on the crystal bench. "The captain asked about you yesterday. He wanted to know if you were hurt in the attack." "He did?" "Yes. He seemed concerned that you might be traumatized by the violence. He asked if there was anything he could do to help." Zarathe looked up in surprise. "The monster who destroyed 6 armed warriors is worried about my feelings? Perhaps that is exactly why you should talk to him." Before she could protest, her father continued, "I am assigning you to give Captain Chun a tour of the sacred gardens tomorrow. It is a diplomatic necessity. He has specifically requested to learn about our culture and history." "Father, no. I cannot. You can and you will. Face your fear, daughter. You might learn something important." The next morning came too soon. Zarathe stood at the entrance to the sacred gardens, wearing her finest crystal robes that caught the morning light and threw rainbows across the pathway. Her hand shook as she waited. Captain Chun appeared at exactly the appointed time. He wore simple civilian clothes instead of his usual dark uniform. Up close, she could see more detail she had missed before. Gray threads in his black hair, lines around his eyes from squinting in bright sunlight, small scars on his hands and arms that spoke of a life filled with danger. "Princess Zarathe," he said with a small bow, "thank you for agreeing to show me your sacred places. I know this is an honor not usually given to outsiders." His voice was softer than she expected. During the attack, he had shouted orders with commanding authority. Now he spoke quietly, almost gently. "It is my duty," she replied, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. They walked into the gardens together. The sacred gardens were the most beautiful place on their world. Thousands of memory crystals grew from the ground like trees made of living light. Each crystal held the experiences and knowledge of dead Veltari ancestors. When the wind blew through them, they sang with voices from the past. Zarathe expected Captain Chun to walk quickly through the space, impatient to finish the tour. Instead, he moved very slowly. His heavy boots made almost no sound on the crystal pathways. He stopped often to listen to the singing stones. "There. Beautiful," he said, standing before a tall crystal that glowed with soft blue light. "Are they alive?" "Not alive exactly," Zarathe explained, staying carefully out of reach, "but not dead either. When our people pass away, their memories are stored in these crystals. Their knowledge, their experiences, their emotions, all preserved forever." Captain Chun reached out toward the crystal, then stopped. "May I touch it?" The question surprised her. Most visitors simply grabbed at the crystals without asking. "Yes, but be very gentle. They are fragile." She watched nervously as his scarred hand approached the crystal. She expected him to grab it roughly with his dangerous strength. Instead, his fingertips barely brushed the surface. The touch was so light that the crystal barely responded. The memory stone began to sing, a low, beautiful note that spoke of love and loss and hope for the future. Captain Chun closed his eyes and listened to the sound. "My grandmother used to sing like that," he said quietly. "When I was a child and afraid of the dark, she would sit by my bed and sing until I fell asleep." Zarathe stared at him. This was not what she expected from the terrifying warrior. "You were afraid of things as a child?" Chun opened his eyes and looked at her. For a moment, she saw something vulnerable in his dark gaze. "I was afraid of everything. The sounds outside our shelter, the older children who took our food, the look in my father's eyes when he came home from the war." "What happened to your grandmother?" "She died when I was 8. Enemy soldiers bombed our city. There was nothing left to bury." His hand dropped from the crystal. "That's when I decided to become a soldier, so other children wouldn't have to lose their grandmothers." They continued walking through the gardens. Zarathe found herself looking at Captain Chun differently. She still felt the fear when he moved, still remembered how deadly he could be. But now she saw something else underneath the danger dot. The center of the garden stood the greatest crystal of all. The heart of memory, where the most important experiences of their people were stored. It glowed with rainbow light that danced and shifted like aurora in the sky. "This crystal holds our entire history," Zarathe explained. "Every war we fought, every peace we made, every discovery, every love story, everything that makes us who we are." Captain Chun stared at the massive crystal for a long time without speaking. Finally, he said, "We had something like this on Earth. Museums, libraries, art galleries. Places where we kept our history and beauty." "Had?" His face grew sad. "Most of them were destroyed in the colonial wars. 20 years of fighting between human factions. Cities burned, cultures lost, art turned to ash. By the time we stopped killing each other and looked at the stars, half of our heritage was gone. That's terrible." "Yes, it was. That's why I joined the Terran Federation. Not to conquer other worlds, but to make sure we never lose everything again. And to protect others from making the same mistakes we did." Zarathe felt something shift inside her chest. The fear was still there, but it was changing into something else. "Is that why you fight? To preserve beauty?" Captain Chun turned to look at her. "What else is worth fighting for?" They stood together in the singing garden, surrounded by the voices of the dead. Zarathe realized that she was no longer trembling. The human warrior still frightened her, but now she understood why. "You scare me," she said suddenly. "I know," Captain Chun replied calmly. I scare most people. But not because you're evil or cruel. Then why? Zarathe searched for the right words. Because you remind us what we could lose. Because you show us that the universe is not safe. Because you prove that sometimes, to keep beautiful things alive, someone has to be willing to become something dark. Captain Chun nodded slowly. My daughter used to say something like that. You have a child? Had. His voice became very quiet. She died in the last battle of the colonial wars. She was 17. Wanted to be an artist, like the people who made these crystals. She said soldiers like me were necessary, but she hoped her children would never need us. Zarathe felt her heart break a little. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for her. She died protecting a school full of children. She became a soldier in the end, just like her father. But she died for something beautiful. They walked back toward the palace in comfortable silence. As they reached the entrance, Captain Chun stopped and turned to her. Princess, I want you to know something. When I fought those attackers, I wasn't thinking about tactics or strategy or victory. I was thinking about the crystal sculptures in that room. About the music your people make. About the light in your skin when you smile. I was thinking that the universe would be a darker place if something happened to any of it. Zarathe looked into his tired, scarred face. You really mean that? Beauty is rare in the galaxy, Princess. Most of space is cold and empty and hostile. When you find something precious, something worth protecting, you don't let it go without a fight. As Captain Chun walked away toward his quarters, Zarathe remained in the garden entrance. The fear was still there, but it had transformed into something else. Respect, understanding, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of trust. She understood now why her father had made the alliance. Humans like Captain Chun were not monsters who chose to protect. They were protectors who had learned to become monsters when necessary, and perhaps that made all the difference. The attack came at dawn on the 5th day of the summit. Not the small terrorist strike from before, but something much worse. Something the Veltari had only heard about in nightmares passed down through their memory crystals. The Zenthka swarm had found them. Zarathe woke to the sound of screaming. Not from people, but from the crystal walls themselves. The bioships of the Zenthka were already in the atmosphere, their acidic hulls burning through the morning sky like falling stars. She ran to her window and gasped in horror. The organic vessels looked like giant insects with wings of stretched membrane and holes that pulsed like living hearts. They moved in formation like a swarm of cosmic locusts, darkening the sky above the crystal city. The first bioship crashed into the palace's outer wall. Where it struck, the beautiful crystal began to rot and dissolve. The ship's sides split open like a cocoon, spilling out hundreds of insectoid soldiers. The Zenthka were every peaceful species' nightmare. Parasitic creatures that consumed other life forms to grow stronger. They turned planets into breeding grounds and civilizations into food. The Veltari had thought their remote location would keep them safe. They were wrong. Alarms began ringing throughout the palace. The sound was musical, like everything the Veltari made, but filled with desperate fear. Zarathe could hear running footsteps in the corridors outside her room. Voices shouting orders in several different languages. She pressed her back against the wall, crystal skin flickering with terror. The Veltari had no real military. Their guards were trained for ceremony, not war. Against the Zenthka swarm, they would be helpless. Her door burst open. Captain Chun stood in the entrance, wearing full combat armor that made him look even more dangerous than before. His dark eyes quickly scanned the room for threats before focusing on her. Princess, we need to move. Now. What's happening? She asked, though she already knew. Full invasion. Zenthka bioships in the atmosphere. Ground forces landing throughout the city. Your father is being evacuated to the secure bunkers, but we got cut off from the main group. As if to prove his point, something large crashed into the wall outside. Through the broken crystal, Zarathe could see insectoid shapes moving in the corridors below. Captain Chun pulled out a strange weapon she had never seen before. It looked like a mix of human technology and Veltari crystal work. Can you sing tune crystals under stress? What? Can you make the memory crystals respond to your voice when you're scared? Zarathe nodded, confused by the odd question. Good, I'm going to need that. He moved to the window and looked out. We have to reach the central spire. Your father's emergency bunker is there. Can you stay close to me and do exactly what I say? Yes. Then let's go. They left her chambers and entered a nightmare. The beautiful crystal corridors were filled with smoke and the sound of battle. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, both Veltari guards and alien delegates who had tried to fight. The insectoid Zenthka soldiers skittered through the halls on too many legs, their acid weapons burning holes in everything they touched. Captain Chen moved through the chaos like he was born for it. His strange weapon fired bolts of energy that could punch through Zenthka armor. When enemies got too close, he fought with his hands and feet, using the crystal walls themselves as weapons. But what amazed Zarathe was how he protected her. Every step he took, every shot he fired, every move he made was calculated to keep her safe. When acid weapons fired in her direction, he threw himself in the way. When insectoid claws reached for her, his hands were there first. They reached a collapsed section where falling debris blocked their path. Behind them, more Zenthka soldiers were coming. Ahead, the way was sealed. Princess, Captain Chun said urgently, I need you to sing to that crystal support beam. Make it resonate at the frequency that will shatter the debris. I don't know if I can. You can. Just like your ancestors did when they built these walls. Feel the crystal's natural vibration and match it with your voice. Zarathe closed her eyes and reached out with her senses. The crystal support beam hummed with trapped energy. She began to sing, her voice finding the right tone. The beam began to glow, then vibrate, then crack. The debris shattered, clearing their path. But the effort had taken time. The Zenthka soldiers were almost on them. Run! Captain Chun shouted. They raced through the opening as energy bolts burned the air around them. One shot came too close, grazing Captain Chun's arm. The acid weapon left a smoking wound that should have crippled him. Instead, he just grunted and kept moving. You're hurt, Zarathe cried. I'm fine. Keep moving. They climbed a spiral staircase that wound around the central spire. More enemies appeared above and below them. Captain Chun fought with terrifying efficiency, his crystal-enhanced weapons cutting through their ranks. But there were too many of them. Princess, he said as he reloaded his weapon, I need you to do something for me. What? There's a memory crystal node 3 floors up. If you can reach it and sing the emergency code your father taught you, it will activate the palace's defense systems. The automated crystal weapons that your ancestors built but never thought they would need. Zarathe stared at him in horror. What about you? I'll hold them here. Give you time to reach the node. No, I won't leave you. Captain Chun grabbed her shoulders with his strong hands. His dark eyes were fierce but kind. Listen to me. You are not just a princess. You are the future of your people. If the Zenthka win here, they will spread across the galaxy like a plague. Other worlds will fall. Other civilizations will die. But if you can activate those defenses, we can stop them. I'm scared. Good. Fear will keep you alive. But don't let it stop you from doing what needs to be done. He turned back toward the approaching enemies. Now go. Zarathe ran up the stairs, tears streaming down her crystal cheeks. Behind her, she could hear Captain Chun fighting. The sound of his weapons mixed with the screams and roars of the Zenthka soldiers. She reached the memory crystal node and placed her hands on its surface. The ancient technology responded to her touch, but it wanted more than contact. It wanted the royal code sung in perfect harmony. Zarathe began to sing. Her voice echoed through the crystal spire, calling on power that had slept for centuries. Around her, the palace began to wake up. Crystal weapons emerged from hidden panels. Energy barriers formed in critical locations. The ancient defenses of her people came online. The Zenthka invasion slowed, then stopped. Then began to retreat as the palace fought back with weapons of pure crystallized light. But when Zarathe ran back down the stairs, she found Captain Chun collapsed against the wall. His armor was burned and broken. Acid wounds covered his arms and chest. Green blood from the Zenthka mixed with his own red blood on the crystal floor. "Captain!" She knelt beside him. He looked up with tired eyes. "Did it work?" "Yes, the defenses are active. The Zenthka are retreating." He smiled, and for the first time since she met him, he looked peaceful. "Good, your people are safe. But you're hurt. We need to get you to the medical center." "I'll live. Your people's healing crystals work on humans too." He struggled to sit up. "Princess?" "Yes?" "Thank you for trusting me." As they sat in the damaged corridor, listening to the sounds of the failing invasion, Zarathe understood something important. Captain Chun has not hesitated to sacrifice himself for her people. He had thrown his body between them and monsters without thinking twice. This was what humans were. Not the monsters that other species feared, but the monsters that monsters feared. And she was no longer afraid. The medical bay of the Crystal Palace had become a place of organized chaos. Valtari healers moved between beds filled with wounded from a dozen different species. The air hummed with the soft songs of healing crystals as they worked to mend both alien and human injuries. 3 days had passed since the Zenthka invasion failed. The bioships had retreated into deep space, their swarm broken by the ancient crystal defenses. The diplomatic summit was officially over, but many delegates remained to help with recovery efforts. Zarathe found Captain Chen in the corner of the medical bay, sitting on a simple bed. His chest and arms were wrapped in crystal healing bandages that glowed with soft blue light. A Valtari medic had just finished checking his wounds, but instead of resting, Captain Chun was carefully working on something in his lab. Zarathe moved closer and saw that he held a damaged memory crystal in his scarred hands. It was one of the smaller ones from the sacred gardens, broken during the fighting. "What are you doing?" she asked. Captain Chun looked up. His face was still pale from blood loss, but his dark eyes were alert. "Trying to repair this. I found it shattered near the heart of memory. The medic said it contained children's songs from your people's past." Zarathe sat in the chair beside his bed. "You don't have to do that. We can make new crystals. But these songs are already lost, aren't they? Once a memory crystal breaks, those specific experiences are gone forever." Yes. But then they're worth saving." His hands moved with surprising gentleness as he tried to fit the crystal pieces together. "I've seen too many beautiful things destroyed. If I can save even one song that made children happy, it's worth the effort." Zarathe watched him work. The healing crystals had closed his wounds, but she could see new scars forming on his skin. More marks to add to the collection he already carried. Evidence of a life spent standing between others and harm. "Captain," she said quietly, "why did you really come here?" He paused in his work. "Your father asked for an alliance. The Terran Federation agreed." "That's not what I mean. Why did you personally come?" "You could have sent another officer." Captain Chun set down the crystal pieces and looked at her. "Because I wanted to see what we were protecting. The report said your people had created something beautiful. A civilization built on art and music and peaceful cooperation. I needed to see it for myself. And what did you think when you saw us? I thought you were everything we used to be, before the wars taught us how to kill. Zarathe felt her crystal skin flicker with emotion. Is that why you fought so hard? Because we reminded you of your past? No. Captain Chun picked up the crystal again, his fingers tracing the broken edges. I fought because you reminded me of our future. What we could become again, if we do our jobs right. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Around them, the medical bay continued its quiet work of healing. Other patients slept or talked softly with their visitors. The sound of crystal songs drifted through the air like a gentle lullaby. I want to apologize, Zarathe said suddenly. For what? For being afraid of you? For thinking you were a monster. Captain Chun smiled sadly. But I am a monster, princess. That's what makes me good at protecting people like you. No. Zarathe shook her head firmly. I understand now. You're not a monster. You're someone who learned to fight monsters. Is there a difference? Yes. A monster destroys because it wants to. You destroy because you have to. A monster feels no pain when it hurts others. You carry every life you've taken like a weight on your soul. Captain Chun's hands went still on the crystal. How do you know that? Because I saw your face during the fighting. You weren't enjoying it. You were doing something necessary and terrible and hating every moment of it. A tear ran down Captain Chun's scarred cheek. My daughter asked me the same question once, whether there was a difference between being a monster and fighting them. I told her there was, but I wasn't sure I believed it. What do you believe now? Now? I think the difference is choice. A monster chooses to hurt others for its own gain. A guardian chooses to hurt others to protect something precious. The actions might look the same, but the reasons matter. Zarathe reached out and touched his hand. Her crystal skin was warm against his scared flesh. Then you are not a monster, Marcus Chun. You are a guardian who has paid a terrible price to keep beautiful things alive. It was the first time she had used his first name. The first time she had touched him without fear. Captain Chun looked down at their joined hands with wonder. You're not afraid of me anymore. I'm still afraid, Zarathe admitted. But not of you. I'm afraid of what might happen to the galaxy without people like you. I'm afraid of what my people might have to become if you ever stop being willing to be our guardians. Captain Chun squeezed her hand gently. That won't happen. There will always be humans willing to carry this burden. Why? Because someone has to. And because the alternative is letting everything beautiful disappear. Emperor Kethmoran appeared in the doorway of the medical bay. The Veltari ruler's crystal form glowed with relief and gratitude as he approached their corner. Captain Chun, the Emperor said formally, I have come to personally thank you for saving my daughter and my people. Just doing my job, Your Majesty. No, you went far beyond duty. You risked your life for people who are not your own species, not your responsibility, not your problem. That is not duty. That is heroism. Captain Chun shifted uncomfortably. I don't feel like a hero. Good, Emperor Kethmoran smiled. If you felt like one, you wouldn't be one. The Emperor turned to his daughter. Zarathe, the alliance documents are ready for the final ceremony. As my heir, you need to be there to witness the signing. She nodded, then looked back at Captain Chun. Will you be there? If I can walk that far without falling over, I'll help you. She offered. An hour later, they stood together in the great crystal hall. The space had been repaired since the invasion, but everyone could see the newer crystals that replaced what had been destroyed. The scars of battle, made beautiful but not forgotten. Representatives from the Terran Federation and the Veltari Empire signed the formal alliance agreement. Other species added their own agreements, creating a network of mutual protection and cooperation. As the ceremony ended, Captain Chun prepared to leave with the human delegation. Their ship was ready, and duty called him to other worlds that needed protection. "Will we see you again?" Zarathe asked as they stood at the landing platform. "Maybe. The galaxy is a big place, and there are always new threats emerging. But now you have our protection. If something comes that your defenses cannot handle, call for us. We will come. I believe you." Captain Chun smiled. "You know, Princess, you taught me something too." "What?" "That fear isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's wisdom. You were right to be afraid of me when we first met. What I am, what I represent, what I might have to do, these are frightening things. But you faced that fear and looked deeper. That took real courage. I had a good teacher." As the human ship lifted off into the star-filled sky, Zarathe watched until it disappeared among the distant lights. She was no longer the sheltered princess who had trembled at a warrior's gaze. She had seen the darkness that existed beyond her crystal world, and she had seen the guardians who stood against it. Her father joined her on the platform. "Do you still fear him, daughter?" Zarathe thought about the question carefully. "I fear what he represents. I fear the necessity of people like him, but I no longer fear him personally. I honor him." "Good, because leaders must understand both beauty and the price of protecting it." As they walked back toward the Crystal Palace, Zarathe carried with her a new understanding. The universe was vast and dangerous, and filled with things that wanted to destroy everything good and beautiful. But it was also filled with guardians who stood against the darkness. And sometimes, the most frightening guardian was the one who had chosen to become a monster so that others could remain innocent. In her room that night, she found something waiting on her crystal desk. The broken memory crystal that Captain Chun had been trying to repair. It was whole again, glowing softly with restored songs from her people's past. Attached was a simple note in his careful handwriting, for future children who should never have to learn how to fight. Zarathe held the crystal close and listened to the ancient songs it contained. Children's voices singing of hope and peace and dreams of a better tomorrow. She understood now why Marcus Chen fought. Not for glory or power or conquest, but for the simple right of children to sing innocent songs in a world where monsters could not reach them. And she was no longer afraid.